Hi there, welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Lindholm. And I think it's time for us women to shift the conversation in business and step into our feminine leadership to do the most iconic work the aesthetic industry has ever seen. Each week, I'll be bringing a powerful dose of strategy, sarcasm, solutions, and sass that will rev up your creativity and ignite your brilliance as you link arms with me along our shared path of personal and professional growth in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Hello, leader. Welcome back to the Fierce Factor podcast. It's your host, Kaylee here, and you are tuning in to episode number 250. This week, I wanted to chat with you about a topic that it's come up quite a bit recently in a few private and also our academy conversations as we are working with our members on building out their 2025 visionary planning meetings with their teams. And one of the most common questions I'm asked from owners at this time of year is, should I share our financial results with my team? And also, should they be privy to the financial goals for this upcoming year? How much should I share with them? What's the right amount of information? So I wanted to address this topic here on the Fierce Factor podcast to share just my personal perspective on this topic. So in this episode, I'm going to talk to you about the importance of transparency with employees, different levels of transparency that you might consider for your team, what should and shouldn't be discussed, how to effectively guide conversations to ensure there's clarity and buy-in to team goals and individual objectives. And then finally, I'll discuss ways to ensure that your approach supports a culture of open communication and inclusion while protecting the best interest of your company. I'll start by sharing a story that inspired me to build our goal setting system that we teach at KLC. It was back when I first started my consulting business in 2016. I was working with a plastic surgeon client who had asked me to come observe one of his team meetings and give him feedback. Now, he was like a really playful guy and he had a really great team. So most of what he presented to his team, he just had this sarcastic, dry humor kind of approach. So he basically pulled up this whiteboard and he said, "Hey team, here's the goal for this year." And then he grabbed a piece of paper and he taped it up on the whiteboard. And it was a picture of a beautiful cherry red Ferrari convertible. And he said, "My wife wants a Ferrari. That means we need to step it up this year. Last year we hit 2 million and we're going to have to double that this year." And because I know he's a good guy and really appreciated his team, I didn't fall out of my chair in that moment. But the reality of what happened is that he got a room full of 8 blank stares, the kind of empty looks that said, "And now what?" And he went into detail about some of the wins and also the challenges that the company had experienced that prior year. And he somewhat got the team bought into the idea that they needed to rally together to elevate in the coming year. So after the meeting, we went back to his office where he asked me for feedback on how I thought he could improve the value of his team meetings. So as a side note, when he was saying value, what he meant was I often encourage my clients to calculate the expense of hosting a team meeting by breaking down their total operating costs per hour. In this case, each meeting valued out approximately like $1,700 expense in this particular case. So not to factor in lost revenue for that hour that the team was not serving customers. Now, when you think about the value of your meetings this way, you show up a little differently, a little more prepared, a little more intentional. For that reason, they become significantly more impactful. As we recapped, I shared with him the following feedback. I told him that while his energy and passion was contagious and inspiring, his big goal may have been a little too elusive for his team to align with. A better approach might be to calculate the big number internally and then reverse engineer that goal into more manageable and actionable objectives for each department and ultimately each team member. Because think about it, while big goals are exciting, they can also be quite intimidating. If you've ever hired a trainer to help you lose 10 pounds or even gain 10 pounds of muscle, you know what I'm talking about. It's the difference between the trainer putting you on the scale every day to weigh you versus redesigning your diet plan and giving you specific macros to focus on consuming daily. And that's the difference between feeling hopeful versus feeling in control of the process. Not to mention, if you're getting on the scale every day, you're probably not going to see it move much. Of course, ultimately, the weight is important and should be measured, But if that's the short-term marker of success, your biggest battle is going to be staying engaged in the process versus focusing on what actions are creating micro wins along the way that ultimately result in the big weight loss, weight gain. That's why, counterintuitively, focusing solely on financial goals can actually be demotivating to an employee when they don't hit them. And just measuring the outcome doesn't give us an indication of what inputs need to change to experience different results. Instead, what if we were to do the work internally, get clarity on the activities that will drive results for our employees, and communicate to them at a granular level? How many leads do we need to convert to paying clients? What marketing messages attract our most valuable customers? What kind of treatment plans create long-term loyalty? What types of affiliations and partnerships drive high-impact referrals? I believe most business owners don't do the work to get their own clarity on what inputs move the needle in their very custom business, mostly because they're lazy. And that's why they default to the big picture goal when casting the vision for their team. And most just stop there. Or worse, they ask someone else for a checklist of KPIs and start tracking what works for another business instead of their own. I believe transparency is important for both employers and employees, and really for these three main reasons. Transparency builds trust and engagement. It improves motivation and alignment, and it encourages collective problem solving. It's a way to create a feedback loop for each team member to better understand how their efforts are impacting the company as a whole. But here's where transparency becomes sticky. Running a business is not only extraordinarily challenging, it's also very expensive. I was at an event a couple years ago when an injector who was working for a plastic surgeon, she approached me and kind of pulled me aside and said, "Tell me more about your coaching programs and how you could help me." She further explained that she was making plans to leave the practice that she was working for because she was generating $1 million a year for the owner and putting all of her earnings right into her owner's pocket. So she was ready to take that income and build an asset for herself. Maybe you've been there, right? This conversation is not uncommon. And I talk to rockstar employees and practices routinely and hear this. And if this is you, before you go out on your own, it's really vital that you educate yourself on the inner workings of a business. She would quickly learn that $1 million of sales revenue would likely generate about $300,000 of income after expenses, not to include startup costs. And much of this budget will be reinvested back into the business to feed its growth the following year. And not to even talk about liability and responsibility of keeping the business alive and feeding its employees. I heard a phrase recently, heavy is the one who wears the crown. Producing revenue is one sliver of responsibility of building a business, taking the risks, creating the vision, managing that team to the vision, and of course, writing the checks. And seeing every single investment into the business as one that is not going back into your personal paycheck. It's a lot of pressure. And I think that's the point here. As founders and leaders, we want our team to recognize the magnitude of both opportunity and responsibility so they fully value their contributions to the guiding mission of the company. And I hear from owners, if I show them their financial contributions, they'll not really know the full picture and maybe they'll want to leave. And the truth is that is always a risk. Also is the risk of how they handle sensitive information about your company, maintaining confidentiality, the risk of how they'll shift focus away from core values solely to financial metrics, or maybe even financial pressure might impact their own psychological safety and their work-life balance, or maybe creates a fissure in team morale. At the end of the day, it comes back to knowing your team, being explicitly clear on the values of the organization, and communicating the vision to the team. It's up to you as a leader to really think about what the goals are in communicating transparency with your team. As an employer, you want your employees to really get excited to be a part of something bigger than them, to focus on doing their best work and to get optimistic and bought into the potential of growth of your company and how that can help them accomplish their own personal and professional goals. And so it's totally instinctive to want to cast a bold vision to the team. And I think there's a way to provide insights that inspire fresh perspectives and drive innovative strategies that help team members align with the core values of the company. And that's through what I call strategic transparency. As a privately held company, you're not legally required to share detailed financial data with your employees in the same way a publicly traded company must disclose financial information to their shareholders and to the public. However, I do think it's valuable to share certain financial information with your employees to create trust with them so that they can understand the company's financial health and performance. And I think this promotes a sense of inclusion and engagement. So they clearly understand how to achieve performance-based metrics to help align employees with their business goals, and especially if compensation is tied to performance metrics such as bonuses or profit-sharing plans. There's no cookie-cutter approach to sharing information. I just highly recommend you take the time to think about what you're trying to accomplish and get really honest with yourself about what's holding you back. If your fear is that your employees won't understand the inner workings of a company, the costs of doing business, educate them. In fact, I've created a whole training on this, how to have the money conversation with your team. And I'll link it up for you in this week's show notes. You can access it for free. From my experience, in most cases, they just haven't been taught how the sausage is made, so to speak. When you are uncomfortably honest in communicating and educating your team on how the company operates, I think you'll find that they're inspired to participate in the financial growth of the company. And if they aren't, then you get to decide if you have the right people who are aligned with your core values. And don't feel pressured to share every last financial decision or detail with your team either. In fact, we have clients who measure their business in relationship to how they communicate with their team solely based on core values and practical growth metrics like membership growth or long-term care plans, because they know that these are metrics that drive financial success for their company. And like the personal trainer who rewards the daily diet plan, it gets their teams more bought into a sustainable growth plan that is highly actionable in their daily operating reality. Here's your action plan. I'm going to give you 10 things you can do to start to better align yourself with the way you want to introduce the idea of being transparent with your team. Number one is to get clear on the transparency objectives that you have for your employees. Number two, ask yourself what information would inspire your team members to take action today. Number three, have the money conversation with your team. Again, you can download my training to help you. Number four, develop clear, accessible reports for your team so they can clearly measure and track their progress weekly or daily. Number five, set up a recurring goals runway conversation with each team member. And six, have these conversations and vision cast consistently with your team and always in monthly team meetings. Number seven, get proactive involvement in this process with your team, inviting their feedback and ideas in financial planning. Number eight, proactively address and mitigate understandings and rumors to ensure that transparency doesn't lead to unwanted concern or anxiety among team members. Number nine, create a culture of open communication and inclusion by discussing outcomes and impacts on both the company and the employees. And finally, number 10, ensure that employees comply with any contractual obligations or agreements that might exist, such as non-disclosures or anything regarding sensitive financial information. In sum, effective communication and education are crucial when sharing financial information to mitigate risk and ensure that transparency leads to positive outcomes. And listen, it's about providing a ton of context, offering visionary insights, and maintaining psychological safety through open dialogue. This can help your employees understand how the financial health of the company is a key pathway to achieving their personal and professional success as a team member. Okay, leader, I hope this episode has been helpful for you to feel confident that whatever you feel comfortable sharing is okay. The strategic transparency you share with your team will totally depend on your company's culture, your leadership, and your strategic goals. If you'd like to take this conversation further, get some strategic guidance on this topic, or maybe you want some support on navigating your own leadership growth, you can schedule a no-pressure discovery call with our team, and I will also link that up in the show notes, or obviously send me a DM on Instagram, and I can personally voice memo you there. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the Fierce Factor podcast, and I look forward to connecting with you, same place, same time, next week. Listen, leader, if you're vibing with me here, hang tight because I have a brand new resource for you. You are a successful, confident, powerful woman who just isn't into being average. No, you have a calling, and part of that calling is requiring you to level up. And I know that if you're working across the next $1 million milestone in your business, you need to be in the right circles. And perhaps that's why you found us. I'd love to invite you to join The Blueprint, a weekly resource for inspired, provocative thinkers who are taking this conversation to the next level. Get access to free business tools, podcast supplements, guideposts, and direct communication with me and my expert team. And of course, a masterfully curated circle of women making big moves and disrupting the status quo in aesthetics and wellness. You can link directly through the show notes or head to klcconsultants.com/blueprint. It's time to elevate. See you there, goddess.